entrepreneurs of the world. My name is Glenn Turansky, and I am a member of the advisory board here at One Business World, the host platform for leading entrepreneurs of the world. Leading Entrepreneurs of the World features entrepreneurs, founders, and business leaders presenting on cutting-edge topics and the latest in industry developments. Our goal is to provide the global business community and entrepreneurial communities with a window into the minds of those who are shaping the future of the world. Today, we're very pleased to welcome leading global entrepreneur, Asaf Cohen. Asaf Cohen is the co-CEO and co-founder of Metrolink. The Metrolink platform allows organizations to design and manage their data pipelines according to their business needs. This is done by enabling intuitive UI, advanced manipulations on diverse and complex data with high performance in a way that amplifies data value while leveraging all data functions and data privacy within the organization. Prior to founding Metrolink, Asaf served as the Israeli Military Intelligence Unit 8200 Deputy Commander. Very impressive. Thank you for your service. He is bringing over 20 years of experience in cyber and data analytics and data science to our conversation today. Asaf's experience has positioned him well to help address the key challenges in today's world of data and how to generate business value from it. Asaf, it's a great pleasure to have you joining us today. We look very much forward to hearing more about the link between Unit 8200 and data plumbing. Let me hand it off to you, and then I'll be back on the backside, and we'll have a conversation thereafter. All right, welcome and thank you again.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Thank you for having me. Thank you to save some time to hear my thoughts and to bring my concept about dealing with the bottleneck of the data world that we experience them today. Actually, a concept that was designed throughout my military service, as you mentioned, but I discovered that it's quite similar. The problem is quite similar both in the army and in the civilian market. I hope what I'm going to say will make a very constructive debate, and maybe will help us to bring the right solution to this problem of data, even though I don't think data is the problem. But let me share my slides and hit the road. So before I start and actually explain the connection between 8200 and data plumbing as a whole, I want to put four theses, 4 sentences, 4 claims that I believe that most of those that handles the data world will actually agree with me. First of all, the huge amount of data. You know, a lot of things have been changed throughout the last 2.5 years since we are dealing with COVID. And a lot of things actually been demolished, start again, changed. If there is something that haven't been changed and maybe even been accelerated, was the amount of data is being accumulating throughout everywhere, in every organization. And it's not the only problem. The main issue is actually, it's not the amount of data. It's been so complicated and so diverse. Everything is done differently in every organization. And I think the most of the organization actually facing the complex and diverse data in their own environment. Second issue is that we became much more faster and creative environment regarding the decision making. We want the data to come quickly and help us to achieve our decision making, our insights quite quickly in order to change the way we're dealing. Because if we not be the first, we lose in the contest against our rival. So we need insights quite quickly. We need the data to be ready quite quickly. And due to the fact that most of the data now become more and more stream oriented, we want the event-based data to be handled quite quickly. And those who actually want deal with the event-based data won't be able to create a genuine, reliable data for this decision-making process. The third, I believe that in order to use the data properly, everyone should be accessible to the data. As long as just those that have the knowledge and the resources to access the data will be able to do so, we won't have a real contest. We won't have the possibility of the small organization to raise, because those who have the resources and the knowledge, actually will be able to deal with all kinds of data and will be able to generate value quite quickly, and actually have much more capacity to bring value and to bring the decision making into a stage that will be make them actually far more progress than the others. And the last, but surely not the least, maybe the most important one, in order to do so, in order to make the data accessible to everyone, actually we need to bring everyone much more closer to the data. Today, the data processing issue is handled especially by data engineers. And I said advanced, I really think, and really think that the data engineers are heroes. They actually have the burden to handle all kinds of data, the enormous amount of data, the complex data, and they've become the button of the organization, because everybody wants them to work on all kinds of data. They want them to do it fast. There aren't enough of data engineers, and they are actually the real heroes. But if we want to make the data accessible for everyone, if you really want to be able to deal with all this huge amount of data, this complex data, we need to bring those who actually are not coded oriented, not engineer, to deal with the data itself. We need to bring the analyst. We need to bring the data scientist much more closer to the engineer, to allow them to do some of the engineering work without being engineered. That's what I'm calling analytics engineering. At the same time, I think that the engineers must come a bit closer to the business point of view of the organization in order to understand better what they're dealing with, and they actually become themselves a little bit more of analytic engineers. And I will relate to that afterwards. And after saying those three statements, I can actually introduce myself. I haven't been done it until now. You did a great job, Glenn, but allow me. So you said my name is Asaf, but actually everybody calls me Pizer, P-I-Z-Z-D-R. It's a nickname I got in the army when I started the service when I was 18. And now, of course, I'm just 22, so it's just 4 years ago. I've been 26 years in the unit, the 8200. Dealing with all kinds of issues, especially with data and cyber. I led the data organization within 8200, dealing with both analysts, data scientists, data engineers, almost more than 2,000 soldiers at that time. And I have to be honest, most of the period when I was in 8200, I put very much effort in bringing much more data. I wanted to deal with enormous amount of intelligence entity. It is not the time of the place to talk about these entities, but we needed to bring a lot of information about intelligence entity. So we did a lot of effort in order to collect much more intelligence, to collect data from all kinds of sources. But in a certain point of time, I actually understood that just a friction of this data being used by the analysts, by the data scientists. And the main problem was that actually they weren't accessible to the right data sets. Most of the data actually haven't been handled properly in order to make it usable. And when it was usable, Unit 8200 had a great success, but when it didn't, we had some very, very enormous disappointment. I'll share two stories with you. For the first is a very good success story where 8200 had some information about two terrorists. They were going to blow up a meat grinder within an airplane in Australia. We got the data soon enough, we handled it properly, and we had the time to alert the Australian authority about the terror attack that is going to be taken against the Australian plane, sorry. Actually, they arrested the two terrorists. They found out the meat grinder, and the attack was foiled just a few days before they actually were intended to do it. This is a very good example for what happened when we deal in the proper way with data. But a few weeks afterwards, there was an attack of ISIL in Europe, one of the major cities in Europe. After this, due to this attack, they severed a few casualties. And we were quite frustrated in the unit because we say, hey, how we didn't have an alert in advance? And we looked on our data and we discovered actually that we had two pieces of data. One of them was properly handled, but we couldn't understand it with another piece of data that wasn't handled at all. It wasn't accessible at the time of the attack. And we actually discovered it just after the data engineers had the time to handle with this kind of data. It's not their fault because they had some other things that were prioritized for them to deal with. We are very, very frustrated because actually we could give an alert and save people's lives, and we didn't. And we looked into our system. We looked into our process in order to understand what was the main problem. And we discovered that the main problem was the data integration process. And when I got released from 8200 and talked with a lot of companies in the market, I discovered that everybody suffers from the same problems. And it doesn't matter whether you are a fintech company or a healthcare company or a micromobility company or electronics company. Everybody accumulating data, and everybody has to go through this data preparation, data integration process. And every time, again and again, it's very hard, it's very long and very costly process. So I started to think what we need to do differently. Because are we really challenged by data preparation, the data integration? First of all, yes, we are. But I started to read more and more posts and articles about data integration, data preparation process. And I discovered that some of the leaders in the data world start to claim that actually the main problem is the data itself. There is too much data. And I say, hey, this is wrong. The data, using the data in the right way can reveal so much about everything we actually been doing in our life. So we need to find a way to deal with the problem, not to say, hey, the data is the problem. Data is not a problem. Data is a power that we need to enhance. We need to deal with in the proper way. But we need to discover how we deal with this preparation. And as you see, there is a huge amount of data, but not enough manpower to deal with the data. So what we have to do? We've looked into the data preparation process, and actually we discovered that the main issue is the process, the iteration going on between the data engineer and the business analyst and the data scientist. Because when the data pipeline are being created, are being developed, are being coded by the data engineer, according to the requirements of the data, of the business analyst or data scientist, but then the starting iteration about what happened with the data, something that has been changed. They want something new. They want something else. This is not the specific data set that they think that they would have. And this is process taking ages until actually the data set has been created, the data pipeline is being developed, the data set is ready to be required by those actually want to do something with the data, those analysts and data scientists. And after, by the way, they finish, someone have to maintain those data pipelines. Now imagine what happens when data engineer code a data pipeline and they leave the organization. Try to maintain a code of another engineer. Actually, it can be done. The data pipeline will be coded again by another data engineer. Hey, another project. Again, few weeks or even months sometimes in order to create the new data pipeline, in order to create a data set that those who generate value from it need in order to do their job. So I think it's quite clear that what I'm implying is that we need to shorten this iteration process, this iteration between data engineers and the business analysts or data scientists. And as I said earlier, I think the data engineers are not the problem. They are the solution. They are actually the heroes. But if I will be able to bring those who actually do something with the data and the engineers closer, and I'm not talking from organizational point of view, but closer in concept, and allow them to actually help each other doing the job, I'll short the iteration and I'll make it much more efficient, much more shorter, and much more, and it costs much less. But of course, the main question is how? How will I make it much more efficient? And I think that we need to address two new paradigms, because if we look at the old paradigm say, hey, you want to do a much more data pipeline, bring much more data engineers. But there aren't enough. There aren't enough data engineers in the market. The data engineer costs a lot, honestly, and they should have. You know, I talked with some of my colleagues that try to recruit data engineers, and they said it's taking a few months, and then they have another one in the company, but it's not enough. They have to double the team, not to bring just one data engineer. So I think the old paradigm that bring much more data manpower into the company, it's not relevant anymore. And we need to look ahead and address the new paradigm. And in order to think about it, I looked at the mobile world. And hey, Glenn, we're both familiar with the mobile world 20 years ago, when just those that had the knowledge and the resources could actually use the mobile. You remember there was the big one, those, and you paid quite a lot in order to use it, and it was quite complicated. And then was the rise of the operating system, now familiar by the name Android and iOS, but not the only one. And what the operating system did, actually, they bridged between the handset itself to the content. And now everybody can use the handset, have whatever content they want with quite affordable price. Everybody can use the mobile. The mobile become a commodity. And hey, we actually want to do the same with data. We want everybody to use the data for their own need, like a commodity. And I think the way to do it, I hinted about it earlier, is to bring all the entities that deal with data much closer. And I want to create a ripple effect. I want to close the gap between the data analyst and the data scientist and the data engineer, and actually create a situation where everybody will be a part of this data engineering process, with this data integration process. We call them data citizens. There are those actually that not know code, they can't code, they are not developers, but they know data. They understand what they want to do with the data. They know what queries they want to run. They want what the data can generate to their business. And they're actually able to manipulate the data in a way that will allow them to use it. So we need to give them the opportunity to do so without code, without being an engineer. In that way, actually, what I'm saying is I'm leveraging the engineering teams with those who actually are not real engineers on the one hand, but are able to do some of the engineering work using the right tool and the right environment. And actually here, I'm narrowing the problem I talked about earlier. But it's not just a concept. I can't just say, hey, give your data citizens, give your data analysts the freedom to create their own data pipelines. They can't do it nowadays, because now that everything is being based on coding the data pipelines. We have to, of course, to have the right tool in order to do so. And by using the tool, and I talk about the tool in a minute, to shorten the iteration. Hey, it's not them and me anymore. It's data engineer and the analyst engineer, the data citizens in the same pack. We are all working for the same cause. We are all working in order to bring the right data set at the right time to the right place in order to bring value, to generate value from the data, from the company purpose. And this should be done, as I said earlier, by the right tool. And when I'm talking about the tool, of course, it should be no code required. And I mean that those who don't know code will be able to access the data, manipulate the data, and those who know code will be able to generate it, to generate their own code within the platform. So both engineers and the data citizen will be able to create data pipelines, will be able to create the right data set to their purposes. the platform, the tool must, and I mean must address the event-based data, the streaming data, because as I said, everything is becoming streaming. Not everything, but a lot of data is becoming stream data, and without dealing with it, actually you can generate valuable insights. And sometimes when I'm talking with some of the data leaders, they say, hey, if you can generate what you just said, you lack of performance, the cost is too high, and say, hey, I don't think so. Everything, the tool must perform a high performance to be speed, to be fast, and to cost, to be affordable. As I said about the mobile, everybody can access in an affordable cost. The same with data. The same, the tools that allow you to access the data, manipulate it, and in an affordable cost, in high performance. And spare me from talking about all the ETL, ELT systems or platform are being used today, because none of them actually allows everybody to access and to manipulate in the way actually I've just talked about it. And actually, I think that even by saying ETL and ELT, actually making boundaries. Why should you be bounded in your own with your own data? You should be flexible enough to use the data whenever you want, wherever you want, to manipulate it, to transform the data whenever you want. Why ETL? Why ELT? I don't want to ELT. I want sometimes to ETL. I want sometimes to ELT. I want sometimes my data source to be a target. I want some of the target to be data source. You should be multiflex. You should be able to do whatever you want with the data. So it's a concept of bringing everybody together, closer, to close the gap. But it's a technological tool that must support this concept in order to make it happen. I'll try to summarize in a few sentences, if I may. And I say really 2 sentences to conclude my, my speech until now. I do believe that the world is going under a data revolution. You can call it whatever evolution you want and what number you want to give it. And I think every organization goes through a different kind of revolution. But I think that just those actually will master the principle of data accessibility for everyone, of event-based handling as a must, and the creation of data citizens and allow them to be a part of the data engineer team of the data integration process, will be able to master the next revolution and will be able to really generate value from the data in the next phase. That's it for now. Thank you very much for listening. And have everybody a great 2022 and be safe, stay safe. Glenn, to you.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your thoughts. You know, starting out, when I was first in college, some 42 years ago, it was interesting. It was the first year that our computer curriculum switched names. We went from data processing to information systems. And that was, you know, that was kind of significant because it was moving away from, well, it's all of this complex bits and bytes and it's coding, to how do we make it more usable, right? How do we make it in a way more democratic, right? Opening it up for everyone to see, not just these guys up in the tower with you know, with the security locks in the door, right? Trying to come through it. So that I always thought that was kind of significant. I love the fact that you and I don't know if you trademarked this or not, but data citizens is a great phrase. And I think that should be the goal for any kind of situation like this. And the integration amongst the data engineers, your true coders, your programmers, and the business units at large, I think, is incredibly important. I think a lot of organizations are starting to strive for that, because that's how you get your needs met, right? That's how you ensure that the performance is there. nobody ever wants to kind of end up in a spot where they come back and say, "Oh, I could have been," right? How had I asked the question or raised my hand and said, because sometimes obviously with people's background, the challenge I think a lot for data scientists and data engineers is to be able to communicate all of their expertise back to, say, the business units in a way that they understand, right? And then take that knowledge and say, okay, and they also have to both, I think, be good listeners, right? They have to kind of come back and say, okay, here's what I'm active listening, right? Here's what I think I'm hearing you tell me, but here's what I need. And then kind of have a little bit of a two-way street as they try to, again, because you're all on the same team, right? At the end of the day, and then you're trying to get that accessibility for people. I think what you said about mobile is a great way to think about it or frame it, because you look at what has happened now to society through the power of the smartphone, right? And being able to communicate. Why couldn't data go down that same path?
Exactly.
Right. When you were with Unit 8200, how much flexibility did you have within the unit to have those types of conversations with the users and the business units and things? Did you, or was it very much, again, coming from a military background, was it more hierarchical, or was there a lot of back and forth?
So we had the opportunity to go on and to make them close, to close the gap, as I said, but not enough. And the main issue was that actually you've been working on the next operation, and you never had enough time to stop for a minute to say, hey, let's sit down, talk, let's try to understand each other, let's make the language the same language in order to make all the process much more efficient. Because, hey, I've looked to the next step. When we created Metrolink, I went to one of my colleagues to ask him whether we are able to do what we're saying we want to do. And he told me, hey, yes, you can. It's irrelevant. It's a complicated technology, but yes, you can do it. And I asked him, why didn't we? Well, we didn't win. 8200 did it. So he told me, because every morning we started the day with another operation, with another terror attack, with another thing that we had to address on a real time. And so you can't stop. You can't change a concept. You can't change your tool. And some of this actually we inherit into Metrolink. And when we come to some of the organization, we don't say, hey, you need to stop everything and to change your infrastructure. No. Go ahead. I know you are busy people. Go on and keep working as you did until now, and incorporate us within the organization, and we will see that we will be having a better result with us. And after that, we will do the change.
Yeah, you would think as you're working through, and certainly Metrolink from an entrepreneurial standpoint exhibits those qualities. And again, trying to kind of take a step back and democratize the data, make it more accessible. You would think as part of that, and you're right. I think in the military, it's the crisis of the day, right? You get dropped in, and it's all about saving lives, saving the day.
Right.
Not a lot of time sometimes for self-reflection, or come back and say, well, I mean, there's always, reviews of work, I'm sure, and okay, how did we perform? Could we have done maybe something a little bit different? But it's really tough to go back, I think, and have that, given that the types of urgent situations that I'm sure you were otherwise being involved with or otherwise responsible for. But I think from a traditional business kind of setup with corporations and the like, it would be really great if, as part of all of that, those planning meetings, that the data engineers would be welcomed into those planning meetings, have a seat at the table, right? Not just be up in the tower and say, okay, what's the request? Let me go fulfill it, but be there and offer their solutions and expertise in order to get those ripples, I think, and get those ripples out. Because without them sitting at the table, you think of throwing a rock into a pond, or without them kind of being the rock, how do you get the ripples, right? Without them having to be able to come back and give you some feedback as it plays out. So
My neighbor, Ben. I'll use it. I'll use the rock.
that's fine. Hey, on the Metrolink side, what types of customers are you finding yourself interacting with?
So actually, we're interacting with all the organizations that have a complex and diverse and multi-source data, and they want to shorten the data integration process. Most of those organizations, we call them data immigrants. Those organizations that actually are being onboarding the data walls nowadays, and they're looking for solutions that are not enforcing them to build enormous teams that actually couldn't be built. As I said, you can bring a lot of data engineers. And we discovered actually it's from young startup until enterprises. Everybody suffers from the same problem. Everybody are in different stage. So actually we've been talking with all kinds of organizations, and we're working with all kinds of organizations in size and maturity.
Okay. From an organizational standpoint, what would you view as the biggest challenge? Or you used the word friction at one point. But what do you think would be the biggest challenge for companies as they look at the data landscape?
So I've talked about narrowing the gap, and I said not from organizational point of view, because I think the main problem is that the data analysts and the data scientists are in the area of analytics, and the engineers are in the engineering part of the organization, in the R&D, and everybody is very protective on its own territory. And I think organizations have to understand that it's not organizational issue. They don't have to be in the same place, organizational point of view, but they have to work together. They have to change the process, and I think it's a challenge to change the process. This is why you need a platform. You need something in a tech environment that allow them actually to work in the same environment, to use the same language, even though the language is being created through the platform itself.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Having them be able to walk side by side, hear each other, and then be able to process those requests and get the proper types of output, I think would be really critical for people's success. I think go ahead.
I have to say that we encountered very intelligent and very smart people throughout our journey. VP R&D, CIOs, CDOs, CAOs that actually understood the vision. They understood that they actually doesn't have to give up anything and but they can gain much more by doing this effort, this change. And those who have the vision can easily connect to it and do the change they need to do.
Again, data should be embedded in any organization's strategic plan, right? If it's not, then they're really having they're gonna wind up encountering potentially missed opportunities, or again resistance. And I think what you said is important. Nobody's trying to take away anybody's responsibilities or expertise. I think what they're asking to do is just share it, make it a little bit more accessible, recognize that a lot of people bring a lot of interesting talents to the boardroom table, to the conference room where you're working on these types of things, when you're strategizing, and recognize everybody's expertise. But if they're able to really listen and understand and then collaborate, I think you'll have an effective operation at the end of the day. And again, accessibility, performance, speed, all the types of things you talked about. Because sure, anytime you pick up a data set, it's like, now what, right? Oh my God, how this is too much, right? How do I sort through this, right, from a complexity standpoint? But the tools are there, the expertise is there. As you said, I think what you need is the vision to have that and come back and say, you know what, we're all on the same team here. We can all succeed. It's just a matter of us kind of working together, listening to each other, and then really harvesting everyone's talents and putting it to the best use, I think, kind of going forward.
Exactly.
Well, listen, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your military service. I mean, it's incredibly important. You know, you talk about data heroes. Certainly, you qualify in that category.
Thank you very much.
So we really appreciate the opportunity for you to spend some time with us today. Fascinating conversation. It's such an important topic. And we look forward to seeing you hopefully again in the future, okay?
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, you're most welcome. Thank you again. Great expertise, great entrepreneurial spirit. Take good care of yourself.
Thank you very much. You too.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.